Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Okay, a big round of good morning from the panelists.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, okay, good. Welcome to the Edson webinar series. Yeah, this is a webinar number 6 from us. Okay, and for this morning, what we will be doing is we will be talking about a topic which is really close to everybody's heart. Okay, we're going to be talking about the SSO, yeah, or the shared services and outsourcing landscape. Of course, when we talk about the SSO and the landscape of the SSO post MCO, post lockdown, all right, what do we see will be the changes? What kind of expectations can we see? And also, for those in the industry and for those who are supporting the industry, what kind of preparations do you feel that we need to put into place? Right, and of course, we will be having our chat and shared by our panelists. We've got 3 individual panelists here. So this session is about 2 hours from 10 to 12, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So as we move along, as we mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and put your questions down in the chat, or you can chime in, unmute yourself, and you can ask questions. All right, we're breaking this down into 4 parts. First will be introductions, and then we will go into the topic and hear what the panelists have to say about a few areas. And then subsequently, we'll do Q&A. And after the Q&A, we'll have some closing remarks. Okay? All right, so without any further ado, let me just go ahead and introduce myself. Yeah, my name is Ken Ng, okay, and I am the CEO and also the Senior Managing Consultant for Edson. And Edson, what Edson does is we are in training and development and of course consulting, yeah, in the SSO space, right, and also training in the corporate space. All right. We also have a division now, okay, that is doing medical equipment, okay, and also supporting post MCO. Yeah, anything from your medical equipment, from your masks, from your sanitization needs, thermal cameras. Yeah, so we're doing all that to support our clients. Right? And so that's who we are. We've been doing this for the past 17 years. Okay, and of course, this is part of the series where we go into post MCO and we go into webinars, yeah, just to reach out and stay connected, and also a service to the industry. Okay, and I believe that's a constant. That's something that we need constantly. Okay, all right. So that's me. Let's go ahead and do a round of introductions from our panelists. Okay, and then I will go into the topic and framing the. All right, so Zul, do you mind if we start with you? Yeah, since we spoke about how everything is always alphabetical and you always end up last, right? So we'll go ahead and go with Zul. Yeah, go ahead, Zul.
Hi, thanks, Ken. Morning, fellow panelists. Morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing fine. It's a bit gloomy here in Shah Alam, but so I decided to put up some blue skies in Liverpool to make sure everybody's bright and cheery this morning. Hi, as introduced by Ken, my name is Zulfiqar. I am the Managing Director of I2M Ventures. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of Khazanah National. For a better part of the last decade, we've been responsible for the program called GBS Iskandar. For those that are not familiar, GBS is Global Business Services, which is pretty much an extension of shared services and outsourcing. So very much relevant to the topic today. Personally, I've been involved in the SSO industry for probably 17, 18 years now, since my time in Cyberjaya. So what we do is we have been responsible for attracting and also facilitating companies who want to operate the global business services operations out of Iskandar Putri. So we're responsible for the planning, also the development of the kind of incentives, working with federal and state government agencies, and later on working on what are the facilitation requirements that companies and individuals may require when they operate shared services and outsourcing in Iskandar Putri. So as you rightfully said, it's an unprecedented time. Although we've been adapting to what are those requirements of companies in the past, and we continue to do the facilitation today, it's only something that is unnatural to everyone, is uncomfortable to everyone to understand what would be the requirements and the preparations going forward. So today, I think we're happy to share that with everyone, what we think, and probably try to understand and get some feedback from the other panelists and also the audience in terms of what we should be doing in preparation for post-COVID when that happens.
Great, thank you, Zul. Thank you, Zul. Yeah, understating their role, Zul is actually the spearhead for the entire Iskandar Putri, all right, outsourcing ecosystem, and he's managing that. So you've done a fantastic job, Zul. Thank you for that, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move to Sam. And Sam, I don't know how you're going to summarize your role. Your role is so huge, but go ahead and do your introduction, Sam.
Jack of all trades. So good morning, everybody. I hope you're all safe and well and keeping sane in these interesting times that we live in. So my name is Sam Haggag. I wear a number of hats within Manpower Group, one of them being the country manager of Manpower Group Malaysia. I also have regional responsibility across Asia Pacific and the Middle East for our solutions business. So Manpower Group is primarily focused on supporting organizations with all things human capital. So it could be anything from talent acquisition all the way through to outsourcing. And in fact, SSO is a topic that's very, very close to my heart. I've been with the industry from its very, very early stages. When I was based in Singapore, I was actually fortunate enough to be a member of the founding team that started the Call Center Council in Singapore, which went on to be the Contact Center Association of Singapore, and was fortunate enough to be president of it for 5 years before moving to Malaysia. As Zul says, we live in very interesting times. You know, it's what we're going through is unprecedented. It's never happened in most of our lifetimes. In fact, I think you'd have to go to our parents before they've experienced any kind of similar experience. So with the challenges that we're facing, it also presents opportunities for us. And the SSO has always been at the forefront in terms of driving change and adapting to that change. So I'm very much looking forward to an active discussion this morning, and hopefully we'll have lots and lots of dialogue, not just with the panelists, but also with everybody who's joining us. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you here. All right. And I mean, very well said about the SSO. When you talk about the shared services and outsourcing environment, right, we are constantly moving with change. In fact, the whole industry is out of the requirement need to change. All right. So it's fantastic to have your thoughts. Yeah. And thank you for that. Okay. And of course, yeah, one of the big guys, yeah, one of our big players, one of our most prominent BPOs and the leader of a BPO, Mr. Raymond Devadass. Raymond, do you want to go ahead and chime in?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me here this morning. It's really a great pleasure. So my name is, just a quick introduction. My name is Raymond Devadass, and I am a CEO of a company called Daythree Business Services here. We call ourselves a business process management company. We have about 1,500 people today that we employ. And we really run, many processes within back office processes for banks, for telcos, for financial services companies, and really it's your typical shared services and outsourcing work. And I hope to be able to explain that. I see some questions already in the chat group that what is SSO, and perhaps during these 2 hours we will be getting into a little bit deeper into what is SSO and how it really affects our lives today. And I echo what Sam and Zul mentioned, that this is really unprecedented. And when you've asked me to speak about post-MCO, I think one of the first things is to understand what is happening during MCO before you even think of post-MCO, right? But it's new, it's uncharted territories. The last I've heard that we've gone into some kind of a lockdown situation is when I hear my parents talking about May '69. And I was just born a couple of years after that. So, I never really experienced it, but understood the concept of lockdown really more for my parents, when we went through that period in a short, and that was a very short period, right? I think what's different now is the sustained period that we're going through a lockdown rather than how it was before. So it's very different, literally it's like looking into a crystal ball. So I hope the next 2 hours, we may not have all the answers, but I think we can try to sort of understand the current situation, and that will help us actually plan what to do going forward. And I hope that in the next 2 hours, we'll be able to share some of our thoughts and our insights and have a great discussion on this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Raymond. All right. So Thank you, panelists. Okay, let me just go ahead and frame the topic and where we're heading with this. Okay, so what we are going to be talking about is we're going to talk about the industry, the shared services and outsourcing, BPO, you name it. All right. So if we're talking about that industry specifically and how it's going to face the post-lockdown era. We all know, the whole COVID-19 has put the whole business environment into a tailspin. Everything has changed. Everybody has been put and forced into this change. And Raymond's got a wonderful name for COVID-19 as to what kind of role they played in terms of in enhancing and moving change. So, given what's happened, we all know things are going to be different. So we're not going to talk about COVID-19 too much. I think everybody is more than familiar. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what will happen and what we can anticipate to happen post-lockdown, post-MCO. When we go back to business unusual, what are the changes that we anticipate? Okay, and what are the expectations from all perspectives, from the people, from companies, from governmental bodies, from governance. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. And lastly, okay, we also want to look at what do we predict, will be the biggest indicators and how do we prepare ourselves for that environment. Okay, all right, so that's where we are. We're going to be moving through that. Yeah. So let me just go ahead and shoot a round of questions to everybody here. Okay, we'll start with Zul, then move to Sam, and then Raymond can answer. So essentially, when we talk about the COVID-19 and the MCO situation, all right, I want to just start us off by where you see it and how you feel about the MCO and COVID-19. What kind of effect has happened on the industry? Zul, do you want to go ahead and share with us from an ecosystem?
Sure. I guess from our side, we looked at two particular areas. One is in the efforts to bring in new participants into the GBS Iskandar program. And that has taken, I think, naturally, as everybody has seen, a decline and also a deferment in terms of a lot of the new initiatives that are coming on board. So we do foresee that while we are within this period of uncertainty, that we're trying to maintain contact, we're trying to understand where the relevancy of the support and what kind of things that would be their priorities moving forward, so that when the time comes, then we can also come back to that discussion and revisit some of those discussions that we've had with them in the past. On the other side, we're looking at the facilitation of the companies that are already there. And from that angle, we're trying to see how we can look at, for a sustained period, what would be the impact in terms of business, also in terms of the resources. And also, at the moment, we're also in discussions with seeing how we can also facilitate some of the other priorities that they have. One example that we have is we have a couple of Japanese companies in Iskandar Putri who are doing gaming, who are doing blockchain technology development and so on. And currently their priority is just to ensure that things like immigration issues, things like even facilitating how things are going forward for their employees if they come back from Japan into Malaysia, or can they even go back. So a lot of it is at the moment understanding how we can support the companies in this period, and also how we can plan ahead for what would be the requirements for new companies, even when they decide to revisit some of those discussions. So from our perspective, a lot of it is troubleshooting. A lot of it is making sure that the communication channels are open, and that there's also a way that we can continue to facilitate the companies that we're looking at. And what we anticipate is, I think there will be a time when, as you rightfully said, post-COVID, but it's better to understand what they need now, and also then moving forward, how do we prepare for those opportunities coming forward?
If you can allow me to just chime in here, Zul. In terms of the MCO and in terms of Iskandar Putri, okay, in terms of the changes that has happened during COVID-19, what were some of the changes that you saw and experienced, and what were the things that you felt that was a drastic change that you needed to support?
I think, for example, when we look at the requirements of companies coming forward post-COVID, a lot of it will have a relook in terms of the speed of the ramp-ups that they're looking at. So we're trying to understand then how do we facilitate that as well. On the other side, we're trying to also look at in terms of infrastructure. a lot of them, when we first started the discussion, had very clear planning in terms of what would be the size of the infrastructure, what would be their requirements. But if you look at it now that we are into maybe week 6 of the MCO, we're trying to understand now that they're saying that maybe they don't need, maybe post-COVID for a sustained period of time, maybe half the planning, or maybe a total revisit of what those planning may be required. So a lot of it is still very fluid, but a lot of it is still saying that they have to react to what changes.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that, Zoom. Yeah. Okay. Good. Sam, let's go ahead and pass the ball to you. And how do you see COVID-19? How is it happened? How has it affected you, right, in terms of the human capital space? Yeah. And also, what are the changes that has happened out of this COVID-19? So,
I think the hallmark of the current situation that we have is uncertainty, unpredictability, and also being able to flex the organization, in particular in the human capital space. Nobody could predict exactly what's going to come. The hallmark of it is being able to tap into human capital as and when you need it, and at the appropriate levels. I mean, it's unprecedented to have so much of your workforce actually working in a dispersed manner. Typically in the SSO, we're very infrastructure driven. We tend to be in large places. We work together in a collaborative environment. And now all of a sudden, although working from home is nothing new to sort of middle to senior management, but now you have a significant percentage of your total staff that's working from home. I mean, we estimate that 80% of the industry is working from home at the moment. Could you imagine? So the world has been turned upside down in terms of the ratios. And we all know working from home provides opportunities and also challenges. If nothing else, connectivity is one area. Another thing is balancing your work and home life balance. In many, many cases, especially for the female members of our staff, they're balancing the role of supporting the family. Homeschooling is a significant part, and also being able to deliver on the commitments that you have from work. So the key is really being able to balance so many different priorities. It's also extremely challenging when you're managing and leading a dispersed team. It's difficult to detect if somebody is feeling down, they need support. You need to be able to sense, not just from, since you can't physically see everybody all of the time, you need to be fairly intuitive in terms of knowing when somebody is, maybe flagging a little bit, maybe there are some issues, maybe some virtual arm on the shoulder time to make sure that everybody is okay. And at this time, as I say, this is where I think definitions and reputations of companies are going to be made or lost, because it's very, very easy to get caught up in the sense that business is down at the moment and the blunt instrument is to make cuts. I think at this point in time, how organizations interact with their workforce, how they address their specific needs, I think is going to define the organizations. We're all absolutely certain of one thing, is this virus will be overcome, and life will go on post MCO, post COVID-19. But you'll never get a second chance to create an impression on your employees in terms of how you treat them in this time. So, from a management and leadership perspective, it's an extremely challenging time, not just because of the uncertainty, but because of the different variables that you're having to try and juggle at the same time. But within all of that, I think our industry, as we've said before in the introduction, our industry has a very strong history in innovation. It has a strong history in being able to adapt. So I think we are going to lead many industries by example in terms of how we cope with this particular situation. I think what you will find is, and we're seeing that within our own organization, we're starting to see some real talent emerge. And it's not just about the capability to be able to execute the day-to-day work, but how to engage with people, how to problem solve, how to, the level of commitment to doing a great job. I think, this is really when you can sort of identify your superstars and the leaders of the future. Interesting times for all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a very nice touch there. Thank you for the little inspiring note about us conquering COVID-19. I really hope we do, okay, and I'm sure we will. All right, but I absolutely agree with you. I think our panelists or other panelists will also. Something that you said, that really struck me was the virtual arm on the shoulder, the virtual hand on the shoulder, to show that support, to show that engagement with everybody that's working. I certainly feel that. I certainly find it challenging to be managing my team, right? In terms of, because everybody is so remote, right? And half the time, right? It's a lot about trust. Yeah? It's a lot about the individual competencies, right? And it's hard to balance. Thank you for that, Sam. Okay. All right. So Raymond,
just
right
add,
up here.
Just to add on the virtual side of things, if you'll allow me to. So in the 6 weeks that we've been operating from home, I've held 3 town halls and we've had 3 brainstorming sessions. So cannot emphasize communication enough during that period of time, because as you can imagine, there's a high level of anxiety across the board. So it's super, super important to do that and to be able to demonstrate, the traits that you're looking for from your employees. So sorry to interrupt you, Raymond. I just thought I'd mention that.
That's all right. That's all right. Okay. Now I'll allow you one interruption. After that, I'll admonish you. Okay.
That's it. Yellow card already.
No issue. Interrupt me as much as you want. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people say I babble on. All right. So yes, Mr. Raymond Devadass, right up your alley in terms of that virtual hand on the shoulder. That virtual beard on my neck. As you look over my shoulder. Yeah. So how do you see COVID-19? How has it changed?
So, I think just to put things into perspective, where the SSO industry, I think one thing, that is very unique in the sense in the SSO space and in the work that I do as well, we handle a lot of data. We handle a lot of customer data. We handle a lot of private data. So one of the biggest issues that we've been facing as an industry, and I forgot to mention earlier, that is also that, in my capacity as president of Contact Center Association of Malaysia, in the last 5 weeks, I've been talking to a lot of CEOs of contact centers, of organizations and people who are in this space. And, there was a common theme that we all, most of us, especially who handle private data, struggled with the idea of work from home. In the initial weeks, we struggled. Now, this is nothing new. Work from home is nothing new. We've been speaking about it. We've been talking about it for the last 10 years. From the time of advent of mobility and we have mobile devices today. From 2010, we've been talking about work from home and the possibility to work from home. But we've never picked up the guts and never really put in enough effort and build the necessary framework and infrastructure to make it happen. So we were comfortable in our zones. So technically, traditionally, we've always been in an industry that required huge amount of real estate. Despite, I remember reading a study done by Stanford University that said that, the productivity of a person increases by about 13 to 15%. I think it was about 13%, if I'm not mistaken, as a result of working from home, because they were beginning to see lesser absenteeisms, lesser sick leave, and productivity generally increased. So people like IBM, people like Yahoo took that path. They actually went and sort of encouraged their people to work from home. But no sooner than when they did that, they also retracted. So they found that also that, look, they tried working from home, but it didn't work. And they brought their people back because they felt that for a creative environment, people, and Sam mentioned that earlier, in an area where you need to collaborate, it's probably better if you work as a team. So there's always been this battle between should I or should I not. Now, and I said this yesterday at our pre-briefing meeting, the greatest or the biggest chief digital transformation officer today is this pandemic. Because for all those people who said nay, or all those people who said no, that I was not going to work from home, today you have this virus that has forced us to work from home. So necessity is the mother of inventions, they say, right? So, those people who said, no, I can't do it, are forced to do it today. So really, so if you take stock of what has really happened in the last 5 weeks, is that, and especially in this industry, in this SSO industry, we have sort of very quickly moved and did what we really need to do, the bare minimum that we needed to do to make sure that we can get our people to work from home. Now, the biggest difference with what we've been talking about the last 10 years in terms of working from home, there's two things, two differences. Number one is the fact that, the sheer magnitude of people that we need to move from working from an office environment to working from home, because we're talking about moving the masses. In the past, we have spoken about giving that flexibility to managers, to the professionals, to people of on a higher level or hierarchy of the organization, the option to work from home. But today we are talking about allowing the masses to work from home. Sam mentioned 80%. You're taking 80% of your workforce and allowing them to work from home. And number two is the sustained period in which they're going to work from home. In the past, we allowed them 1 day a week, 2 days a week to work from home. But today you're saying, hey, can you work from home permanently? So that is the biggest difference. And because of that, the industry sort of is grappling and trying to understand. So what we have done in the last 5 weeks is, and maybe successfully, is that we have been able to move people from the office to the homes. But what we need to do next, and I think this is what this discussion is all about. Now that we've moved them away from the office to home, what do we need to do? What is the framework needed? What kind of governance structure is needed as a result of this? Now, the SSO industry prides, in its DNA, having highly engaged teams. Now, that is going to be affected, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later as we go on. We've got 2 hours to speak about it. But, I just want to touch the fact that, that's, let me just give some statistics in terms of what's happening in Malaysia, right? Despite what we hear, Sam mentioned 80% of the people working from home. Now, let me tell you that if you look at, you can't really just slice it across horizontally and say 80% of people are working from home. You also got to look at it vertically, because if you look at contact centers of the banks, for example, almost 100% of the staff are still working from office even today as we speak. Almost 100%. If you look at telcos, almost 100% of their contact center staff in the inbound environment is still working in the office. Right? So you really have to slice it by verticals. And then if you look at the new age companies, the more digital companies, the e-commerce companies, they have made this transition very easily, very smooth in terms of being able to take their people away from office to work from home. So really, you've got to look at it from verticals. You've got to look at it by industry, because not all industries have embraced this work from home culture, despite what we are hearing outside there. Because there are situations where people are, forced to still work from offices.
It looks like the conversation about working from home still needs to continue. Huh? There's still a lot of things that we need to work on, which kind of leads us to the kind of changes we expect to see, post MCO or post lockdown, right? So we talk about working from home, right? And Zul and his team at I2M has worked so hard to set up GBS and its Kanda Putri, right? To set up GBS to create that whole ecosystem, okay? And with this working from home phenomenon coming in, I'm sure it just throws things awry. So I'm not gonna talk too much about the GBS, and I'll let Zul talk about that. So Zul, from that perspective, what kind of changes do you expect when we do come out of this MCO, right? Come out of this lockdown. All right, Zul, go ahead.
Thanks, Ken. I think when you look at what are the changes that we can look at, or what are we anticipating in terms of post MCO, I think it is also more important for us to understand that we hope that this, as Raymond mentioned, the culture of change is not one that is a knee-jerk culture. That this new norm that everyone seems to be talking about today is not the new norm only during MCO, and that whatever changes that has happened doesn't stop the moment the lockdown is lifted, or the moment they think that we go back to normal. So I think the acceptance of first that business or life as how we know it may no longer be the same way we knew it before MCO, it's important to set the mind in terms of how we want to plan to go ahead. So I think that is critical for us to maintain that level of thinking, that how we were nimble enough and how we were quick to adapt to the changes should not be something temporary. Should also be saying that, you know, once we go back to post MCO, it's the moment new ideas come on board, new requirements in terms of whether it's work from home, or what are the policies, or what are the programs that we need to look at to support companies or to support our employees, should say that, you know, it's gone back to the old way of saying, okay, you know, we have to go through the same process of how we did in the past. We have to go through the same justification of how things were in the past. And I think that is something that we have to set the context, and as leaders of our organizations and of the industry, we have to play that role in setting that tone to all the necessary stakeholders. So for us at GBS Iskandar, I think that challenge, we are taking it on as an opportunity, that while the development and the ecosystem may be impacted and there may be some things that we need to adjust, we hope that how things are being addressed can actually take on the same way and the same frame of mind as how it was during the MCO period and as an effect of the MCO period. So things like, for example, now when we look at how we address the human capital development of what is required, I think that's something that is very critical for us, especially the impact of MCO into SSO or GBS in Iskandar Putri has a double-edged effect, where it's not only looking at the risk of jobs that are being impacted, but the inorganic growth of talent that may be required and also that will be available within the location as a result of jobs now no longer being available for returning Malaysians that were coming back from Singapore. So that's also one angle that we're looking at in terms of how do we then address the influx and also the availability of that talent, whether that talent goes through the natural or the odds for them, or do we then find new ways that we can do it today, that when this opportunity arises, as a lot of the data has shown, you know, people are looking at within the next 3 to 6 months as high as 49% retrenchment of employees. So where do these people actually fit into the whole landscape of SSO post-COVID? I think if you look at it today, the spirit of embracing e-commerce, work from home, as rightfully Raymond mentioned, the pandemic has done that job for us in terms of breaking down all the barriers. Even the traditional Ramadan bazaar seller who has opened his or her stall for the last 30 years. Yesterday I was watching a documentary where they were saying, you know, they're willing to embrace that change. They're willing to say that, you know, if you had told them this a year ago, they said, no, you know, makcik tak pandai. I don't know IT. I don't know. I've never used Grab food or e-hailing services. But now the resistance barrier for that change has been brought down completely. It's saying if you don't embrace it, you're not going to be able to survive. And moving forward, we hope that, you know, that change will be the spirit that can lift a lot of the changes that we're looking at.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, yeah, I know the makciks. The makcik will probably say, oh, kita pandai TikTok je, you know. So, Zul, you mentioned the influx, yeah, or rather the expectations, okay, of Malaysians who are working in Singapore, yeah, and also the professionals that we anticipate that will be coming back or will be retrenched, yeah. Would you happen to have some idea of, I know I'm going to put you on the spot, what kind of numbers are we looking at in terms of professionals that are viable to be part of GBS, yeah, okay, and how do you all plan to attract them and how do you all plan to pull them into GBS itself? Do you mind?
I think if you look at just the raw data, today, a majority of the employees that are crossing the causeway and the second link on a daily basis. Numbers are as high as 400,000 to 500,000 people doing that on a daily basis. And if you look at also that the breakdown, I would say as high as 70 to 80% of those employees are actually doing what we would term as low value but high wages type of activities. You know, these are people crossing the border to do your day-to-day job, such as cleaners, they are security guards, they work in shopping malls, and they earn a high level of salary pretty much because of the foreign exchange rate that is making the salaries a lot more attractive. Absolutely. And today, we hear from the Singapore government, you know, a big problem that they're having is whether they'll be more strict in terms of how they want to screen and welcome foreign employees to come and work in Singapore. And we also do see that, you know, for a sustained amount of period, that these people will not be able to return back to Singapore either because of the changes that are going on or because the jobs are no longer there. So we're looking at as high as 50% of those numbers. So between 200,000 to 300,000 people may be left in Johor to say that, you know, I used to be able to commute daily, but then, you know, for at least the next 12, 18 months, I don't know whether that's going to be something that is possible moving forward. And I think we should look at these numbers and see how we can address what needs to be done to not only ensure that their livelihoods are taken care of, but then to make that change in terms of, you know, maybe this is the right time to work with the industry, to work with the government, to say that SSO, BPO, global business services may be an industry that we can accelerate the development so that once they come forward, in terms of the jobs, the most common problem that we always see is, you know, that you don't train the people, then they don't get jobs. But then when we train the people, then the jobs are not there. So that's always the age-old challenge that we have. And I think we have to think and collaborate more with a lot of the players to see how we can address that problem. Absolutely,
absolutely. Okay, thank you for setting that up for Sam. Okay, all right. Sam, I know wants to address this, and he's desperate. He's dying to address this, yeah, because it's such the burning desire, a burning thing for him. Okay, now, but before we go there, I'd like to share my screen very quickly. All right, onto a report, yeah, or a. Oh, I don't have a screen sharing. Can you enable my screen sharing, please? Team, can you please enable my screen sharing? Okay, all right, now, last Saturday, there was a report, and there was a very interesting infographic. Can everybody see this? If you can see this, just go ahead and put the type of 1 in your chat.
Yep,
right.
I can see it.
Yep, everybody can see it? Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay, now, so if you look at the infographic that we have here, it's a very simple report. You can go get it from the Star newspaper or the Star online portal. All right, a few things that we're looking at here. Yeah, so this is post MCO, or what are the expectations? Yeah, where they interviewed close to, if I'm not wrong, close to about 5,000 to 6,000 CEOs. All right, so based on the stats that we have here, one of the stats that I'm really interested for Sam to address, okay, and perhaps to talk about, right, in addition to the training and the development of the human, right, would be this right here. Okay, so 52% now based on expansion, okay, and how the CEOs view their manpower currently, right? So 52% of the CEOs will likely retain their manpower, okay. While now this is the interesting part, yeah, is 42% are considering retrenchment. So, and 65% are planning to reduce their capex. So based on that, if you don't mind, Sam, you can share your perspective, right? And how do you see that affecting you, and how are you preparing for that, right? In the coming months when we go off MCO, all right? And also share with us, you know, the development of the human capital, and what are some of the issues that you foresee that we need to prepare for, or rather, what the changes that you will see that will happen. Yeah? Sam, go over to you.
Okay, sit back, have a coffee. I'm about to start. I mean, you've just. I'm about to get on my soapbox. So, first and foremost, the outlook for our industry is, my personal belief is the outlook for our industry is bright. But I think here is the thing, and this stat is really, really important to focus on it. 52% of the CEOs understand the importance of being able to retain your infrastructure so that when you get the bounce back, you're going to be able to take advantage of the market. Now, again, this is right across the board. So this would include industries that are typically extremely vulnerable to this type of situation. So including manufacturing, including to some extent agri-based businesses, oil and gas, which have been absolutely pounded by the current economy. So the first thing that we're doing, and we are doing this with many of our clients, is proactively looking at all of the possibility to be able to retain your core talent so that when when things turn around, you're best positioned to do that, because everybody, including manufacturing, is going to have capacity. Supply chains are being depleted right across the board. So there's going to be a requirement to be able to do that. So the manufacturers, once the MCO has been lifted and they're able to go back to full productivity, they're not going to have enough people to be able to sustain, especially if they're already cutting. So the key is to look at simple things that you can do to try and sustain your workforce. Typically, if you look at the manufacturing industry as an example, it's an industry where there's a huge level of overtime being worked. So, one of the things that we're advising clients is look carefully about your overtime and spread the work across all of your entire population. So as much as possible, you're reducing your overhead to meet the size of the workforce that you have. Now, let me be very clear about this. This is not about sustaining non-productive staff. This is, performance management and non-productive staff should continue throughout any kind of a situation like this. This is an ongoing question for any business. But the key here is to make sure that you're making the most of the talent that you have. Let's look at the statistics pre-COVID-19. Malaysia's unemployment is below 4%. In any global term, it's full employment. So what it means is that we don't have enough talent. We don't have enough people to be able to sustain the demands of the business. We have an increasing influx of talent coming from overseas, some of that because of the high level of content in terms of the knowledge that they bring and the value that they offer to the organization. Some of it is allowing us to be able, as an industry, to be able to support multiple countries all over the world. Absolutely important, and I suspect that that will continue. But I think what's really important here is that the SSO industry could potentially be a beneficiary of a number of others right-sizing or downsizing. And we kind of Zul touched on the reskilling and repurposing of people to be able to play a role in this industry. And this is massive. There is more demand for people than there are available talent. The challenge is, as with most industries, we're not the most patient industry in the world, right? We want things on tap.
Absolutely not.
We want things...
Allow me to interrupt real quick, Sam. Okay, now are you saying that now since there is a need to upskill the individuals who are not in the industry, so are you saying that whoever is in the SSO right now are fully equipped and have an advantage in the near future when the MCO is lifted?
Absolutely. I think the opportunities for people within the industry is to quickly rise through the ranks. I think what this MCO period is defining is you're starting to identify natural leaders within your organization. People that may never have had the opportunity to be able to address that. You're starting to see them. They're starting to come to the fore of the organization. So the first thing that you need to be doing is you need to be acutely aware of the talent inventory that you have today and provide opportunity for people to grow. As I said, it's a challenging environment to be able to do that in a virtual world, but nevertheless, you're going to have some real diamonds within your organization. That's the first thing. By doing that, you're going to be able to you're going to give yourself capacity to be able to bring people in at maybe the first level, which will allow you to be able to invest in training and development and repurposing of people who may be new to the industry, but may be able to offer some significant support. And again, our industry is not necessarily about people who speak perfect English that are necessarily highly qualified, because what is happening within the MCO is it's opening up a lot of industries that would typically not be touched by ours. The classic example are organizations that are selling fruit and veg that typically would engage directly with restaurants are now going B2C. They're directly working with the consumer, and the demand and the volume is massive. So that's creating opportunities for people to be able to support that demand, whether it's in the follow-up, whether it's in the coordination, or possibly even people being involved in the logistics that support this industry. So I think what we can all look forward to post MCO is a substantial change, I believe, in terms of not just how we do work, but also the buying behaviors of our customers. You know, whilst, you know, a significant number will return to previous behaviors before the MCO, but a significant number are now completely plugged into the e-commerce component of it. I'm absolutely certain that many more people will be using e-commerce platforms, and it won't be just for the traditional white goods, electronics, etc. It will be right across the board, including groceries, including fruit and veg. So that in itself will create an industry, a part of our industry that will support that demand, that will support that increase. And that's, to me, I think that's the opportunity that it presents.
Yeah, but that's very in line. That's very in line with the current government's initiative. For the past few years, you know, they're moving towards, you know, IR forward. You know, the Industry 4.0, right? They put in a lot of training programs. They put in a lot of development areas. They put in a lot of subsidies for the companies to move to the technology and to be competent, yeah, for the economy. So. Isn't that aligned? Do you feel that we are ready for that? Do you feel that when post-MCO, everyone should be able to just fall in place, and we will automatically thrive, yeah, as an economy?
I think the challenge, to be perfectly honest, and we talked about this before, you know, this is an unprecedented time for most of the organizations. I think they were caught out in terms of the rapid pace of change. You know, as a global organization, we spent a great deal of time looking at scenario planning, and we had a number of scenarios pre-planned well in advance of the MCO. And even then we're seeing things generally overtake what we had originally planned. So there is no question it is going to be a challenging environment. And Malaysia is largely an export economy. So we are dependent on what's happening in the rest of the world. So, you know, we may well come out of the MCO, but it depends on how the rest of the region. We're seeing, you know, Singapore struggling with the number of cases being recorded on a daily basis. We've seen full lockdown. They've committed to this lockdown all the way through to the beginning of June. So we have to be more creative in terms of identifying opportunities that may or may not be within the scope. You know, you're hearing about manufacturing companies that are switching their tooling so that they can provide support in terms of ventilators, in terms of machinery to support COVID-19. So innovation is going to be a key component of the DNA of organizations that are going to thrive post the MCO. And the key is your ability to be able to pivot very fast, your ability to have a flexible workforce, because again, the hallmark of this situation, especially with the 42% who are going to downsize, the reality is this: you downsize first to try and protect the survival of your organization. Over a period of time, as business picks up again, then there is going to be more demand. So the ability to be able to tap into just-in-time workforce is going to be absolutely crucial for these organizations to continue beyond the MCO.
Absolutely, yeah. So it sounds like the expectations of, or rather the expectations of change, or how do we see the industry changing? From Zul's perspective, it's very much technology and getting people to embrace, or people are moving towards technology as a platform, right? Sam's talking about the same thing. In terms of the human capital, the people need to be ready, to be technologically inclined, to be able to function in the technology-driven channels, right, of delivery, of service delivery. That really takes us directly to Raymond. Why is everybody setting up the platform for you, Raymond? Yeah. Okay. So,
So
what changes?
So Ken, before we go there, I just want to challenge that those numbers that you put forth earlier, right? So let's add a bit of spice into this conversation, and
Yeah, let's go.
yeah, why I challenge those numbers is because that those statistics is primarily a sort of a knee-jerk reaction, number one, and also an emotional reaction to what is happening now, the sentiments now. But the last 2 years, if you remember, I'm sure you had many training sessions as well, and the last 2 years, I've been running a couple of conferences for the associations and for the industry, and we've kept speaking about VUCA, the VUCA world for the last 2 years, right? And as we spoke about VUCA world, we only spoke about IR 4.0, we spoke about bots, we spoke about artificial intelligence, and the fear of losing jobs as a result of automation, right? Now, this is a double whammy situation now, because that statistics, I am sure, did not take into account the effect of automation. So today you have a situation where organizations are preparing themselves for the next 24 months. Because people are preparing for themselves that we may come out of MCO in June, but we might get into another MCO in November or in September for a second wave or third wave, until vaccination is available to the broad masses. Now, so if you are going to prepare yourselves for the next 2 years, imagine most organizations have a strategic plan for 2 to 3 years. That will involve a lot of automation. So number one, your business is affected already. You're looking at retrenching people. Number two is that you're going to bring in automation more. As I mentioned earlier, this pandemic is your chief digital transformation officer, right? So you're going to force your organization to get looking at technologies that will make you less dependent on people. Now, those numbers are scary, because you're going to see a higher level of unemployment. Now, that's the bad news, right? And the good news is, and perhaps just echoing what Sam was saying, is that as more and more businesses move from offline to online, you're going to have a lot more back office work to handle.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is a absolute positive for the SSO industry. So we are we are lucky. The future is bright for us, because all this digitalization that's taking place is, if we're going to go onto mobile platforms, there's going to be more back office work that needs to be done. And this back office work is actually a positive, it's going to be a positive growth for the SSO industry, for the BPO industry, for the GBS industry. So
for GBS, I think this hits home for GBS, because we're talking about the lower skilled individuals, right? And then when we talk about just back end, back end typically requires lower skilled individuals. All right, okay. So I think that fits in perfectly, right? Yeah.
So well, let's not oversimplify the matter. Yes, it is no doubt a job requirement for back office jobs requirement for people of the lower category. But hang on, you got automation coming in. These people are going to be displaced anyway. Because if you are doing data entry, it's not going to happen anymore in 2 years from now. You're going to get software bots doing that. So back again to what Sam was mentioning earlier, we have this gap, this 24 months gap, to reskill ourselves.
Exactly.
It's very, very important. We've got this gap, very small gap, or small window of 24 months. Actually, it's a breathing space for us, because automation is sort of going to be put on hold to get our people ready to embrace automation. Because earlier on, what was happening was CEOs were going to conferences and saying, "Hey, I want a chatbot. I want some kind of automation in my office." Everybody's forced to do it. People get displaced. But today, you have a 24 months breather to reskill yourself. So you've got to get involved in some of these online courses. You've got to get yourself involved in webinars like this, training courses like this, to get yourself ready for a period post 24 months. So
just to play a devil's advocate, right? Just to play a devil's advocate. Now, like you said, it's a knee-jerk reaction in terms of the retrenchment, in terms of preparation for the next 24 months. We have a breather. Now, let me address the knee-jerk reaction. A lot of the leaders, okay, are seeing the situation right now, right, as temporary. Okay, as temporary. We may be pushed to the digital. We may be pushed towards all of these channels, right, for service, and the whole economy may be changed. But as soon as the vaccine comes along, the COVID-19 will be seen as like any other flu. Okay, so if I put all these changes into place, yeah, and when we do come back to business as usual, all right, will all this be for naught? You know, it's a huge investment. It's a huge change. It's a huge pivot for my organization. All right, is it worth that pressure to put in? Okay, which puts us in that 24 months. Yeah, is it really a breather? Well, I don't know. You know, you may. It's really a survival, right? Okay, for the 24 months. If I make it through this 24 months, I'll be around. If I don't make it, that's it. You know, I'm obliterated.
Yeah, but I think you've got to be a little bit careful with that mindset. Actually, and sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead,
Raymond. I think organizations that adopt that mindset are going to get left way behind.
Yeah.
This is not nice to have. This is an absolute business imperative. You have to invest in your people. Even, as I say, even in highly automated industries, if you look at the highest value interactions are done by human beings. And in our industry, that's the majority of what we do. That, you know, the human experience is absolutely paramount. So, and this goes back to a remark that was made earlier with regards to how you treat your people during this period of time will define the future of your organization moving forward. As I say, this isn't about just cost cutting. Is not, you're not going to trade your way, you know, you're not going to shrink yourself to glory in this kind of an industry. What you need to be is you need to inventory the type of talent that you have. You need to invest in bringing people through the organization so that you can expand your capability to be able to take advantage of the market. And it could be as simple as just upskilling your existing workforce, providing opportunities for the people that you see have demonstrated leadership traits. But, and here is the but, the selection is going to be the type of traits that you're looking for are going to change from what we were looking for before. There will be more emphasis on people with the right type of traits rather than the skills, because you can teach anybody almost anything, but you cannot fundamentally change a person's character. So you're going to see more emphasis go in terms of the capacity of the individual, their character, their traits, rather than the skills or the industries, which again, as Raymond says, is going to give us, our industry, massive, massive opportunities. And I think it will go beyond the 24 months. I agree with Raymond is that we have a window of opportunity and automation is going to come in. But typically when you have change like that, it would typically create opportunities for others, but it will create opportunities for those who are prepared to adapt to the change. The people who are going to struggle are the people that think, okay, post the MCO, things are going to go back to normal, because they won't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
so
that's
Ken,
right.
I just want to add on to that. Ken, you know, I remember, you know, very clearly when I had just come into the workforce and contributing to the economy, so to speak, you know, there was and you know, I was and being an accountant, and I was in that field, and one of the top jobs that came about during this early period of the 90s was this risk officer. And it was just then we were beginning to speak about a risk officer. And, you know, today they are perhaps one of the most highly paid persons in organizations. But that job, that job was just beginning to make its way into the market space. Nobody heard of this job of risk officer, chief risk officer before until then. Now, you know, this is going to be a new norm. You know, what I'm saying is that things like this is going to affect your risk policies. I see that, you know, when organizations come out with tenders and RFPs and whatnot, this is going to be on top of their mind. Are you prepared to be able to work from home? You know, because it's going to be a situation where I think there is no right answer, but this, you know, I really see post MCO, and I think on a more permanent basis, there's going to be a hybrid solution now for SSO industry. You're going to have part of the people working from home. You've got a group of people working from the office. I don't see in some of the more critical industries where you're going to have 100% work from home. I don't think so. Right. This is my personal opinion. but it's going to be I think it's going to be a hybrid model. Now, what that really means is, and going back to engagement and what Sam was saying, the SSO industry thrives, in many ways, it's a lonely, because it's back office work, it's a very lonely environment. You get to meet the same people, and traditionally people think that you sit in a small cubicle for 8 hours a day and it's very boring. And what happens is that what has happened now with the industry is that we have created social spaces in our organization. So if you look at the SSO industry, this is an industry that has invested a lot of money in social spaces. This is the industry where you go ahead now today that has the nicest office. They have a nice breakout area. They've got a nice lounge. They've got a nice pool table, football table, you name it, because it's deemed to be a very, very high stressful job, high stress job. Now, when you talk about engagement, the first words that, probably the first few words that come to my mind is vigor, energy, right? Highly engaged. And you need to get your staff emotionally engaged at work, cognitively engaged at work, and perhaps even, emotionally engaged at work. So physically engaged, cognitively engaged, and emotionally engaged. How are you going to achieve all these three things if it's going to be on a work from home environment? How are you going to do that? Yep.
So Raymond, I completely agree with you. I think you're absolutely on the money. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. I think there will be many CEOs that are going to be more cautious about investing in more infrastructure. So I think whilst I agree with you, our SSO is not going to be all work from home. It's not going to change overnight. But I think a significant component of it will go that route for two reasons. Number one is access to capacity, because in a situation like that, if you can access virtual capacity, then you can literally set up anywhere in the world and tap into capacity at any time. So technology then becomes the driver in terms of that part. And the second part is going to be the next gen leaders. And the next gen leaders will be quite comfortable to lead in a virtual world where they don't necessarily see the people that they're dealing with. And this is, I think, this is what you need to be looking out for within your teams, because you will find, and I've certainly found it within our own organization, you have absolutely natural leaders who have this innate ability to be able to connect without necessarily being physically there. Now, again, this is not going to be, it's not going to be post MCO, but I would hazard a guess that the pace is going to accelerate past the MCO. And it's not just a Malaysia phenomenon. I think it's a global phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. Okay.
So
It's scary to think that it will actually, it's scary to think that it will actually be faster, than the current speed that we're changing. All right.
Well, if you look at the rate of innovation is compressing all the time. If you think about the old days when things like mobile phones were brought to the market, it would typically be you'd bring them in once a year, but products are now being innovated in double quick time. Organizations are bringing products to market that are not necessarily 100% working, but they're getting them out to market to be able to secure market share and to innovate as you're doing. So practical innovation is going to become more and more prevalent in this day. It's more acceptable. People accept the fact that things are not going to be 100% from the get-go. So that's going to drive a very different behavior from leadership. And I think that's going to be quite pervasive throughout organizations. I think innovation is going to win the day.
Raymond, your thoughts?
I agree. I agree with Sam. I think no doubt. But I think technology will sort itself out. I think we are very intelligent people today, right? If you're saying today, for example, that you cannot work from home because I'm able to take out my handphone and take a picture of the customer data, right? I'm sure technology will sort itself out. It's just a matter of time. Somebody is going to come up with a AI-built camera that when you pick up your phone, your screen just blanks off and things like that. It's doable. It's not doable, but where I'm coming from when we talk about a hybrid model, truly engaged organization, it's also the soft side of things, the human side of things, right? And especially in the SSO space, and we talk about the masses. let me just give you a statistic here, right? I don't have a statistics on Malaysia, but let me give you a statistics out of US. Now, US has got a civilian working population of about 140 million people. Now, 7%, only 7%, so that's about 9.6, 9.8 million. 9.8 million people have the option to work from home. Now, out of that 7%, almost 100% are people with white-collar jobs, professionals, and managers and above. Now, there's a very big difference because the balance 93% have not earned the trust to be able to work from home, and therefore they've not been given this option to work from home. Today, we are not talking about the 7%. I have no problems with that. So most organizations, professional organizations who employ highly skilled people will not have that problem because they fall in that 7% category. But we are talking today about the 93% that you need. Now, I'm sure the numbers are pretty similar in Malaysia. Just, so don't read too much into the numbers. But what I'm saying is the larger majority are the ones that you need to transition them to work from home. Now, there are other issues that come along with it. Let me give you my own personal experience. I'm finding it hard to switch off from work while I work from home because I'm going down, I'm having my dinner, and I come back, and before I know it, when I'm back at the office, when I shut down at 7, I shut down at 7. But when I'm at work, I'm finding myself coming back to my room at about 9 p.m. till about 11, till about 1. So I'm personally finding it difficult myself to switch off from work. So the new conversation that we should be having post MCO now, which I think most other countries, or countries like Australia have been talking a lot about this. I remember someone very close to me asked me this question that when she went for an interview in an organization in Australia, the first question they asked her was, "So what's your work-life balance?" And she said, "Look, what do you mean by work-life balance? We don't have it here in Malaysia. What are you talking about?" Right? But these are the conversations that we need to have now at home in Malaysia, in our environment, because work-life balance becomes so important. Someone needs to teach me how to switch off because I really don't know how to. So I'm sure there are many of us in that boat. So I think it's very important that we do not generalize. When we talk about this post-COVID, we should be talking about the 90% of the people who may not have the maturity and may not have not earned the trust to be able to work from home.
Okay. So what do you propose?
So there is a new playbook that is needed for the masses now. I'm not worried about the 7% because most of us belong in that 7% category. We have no issues with it. We'll find a way to solve the problem. But we need a playbook for the masses. The new guy that is coming to work, who's just graduated and coming to work. We don't have a playbook.
Absolutely agree.
Here's the thing though, Raymond. I think the way people are being compensated is also going to change. I think you're going to see more and more elements of results or outcome-based compensation driving, and that's going to drive that behavior. So, there's an old adage of, incent what you expect, and I think that's going to drive more and more of that type of. But I totally agree with you. I think this situation will be the first time for maybe 80-90% of our workforce to have experienced a sustained work from home period. There's, in most of the working population, they've never gone through this before. So to a certain extent, you're kind of expecting some results, some level of adaptation. Now, we are one of the most, if not the most highly metriced industry in the world. So believe me, you can, through the metrics, exactly who's working and who's not working. I think the element and the point that you make, which is hugely important, is that mental health aspect of it, which again, this is what's driving this new type of leadership, because you look at the numbers and the numbers tell you what you need to know in terms of outcomes, but the numbers don't tell you about the state of mind of the individual, the stress level, and the burnout rate. And I think this
let me just ask you a question, Sam. Okay. We all know and we're very familiar in our industry, metrics is king. All right. Nobody gets measured as much as we do. Okay. Now, here's the question. We talk about trust. If we talk about trust, and Raymond says, we need to trust these individuals. We need to find individuals that we can trust, right? That can potentially be productive alone or working individually, right? And then we talk about the metrics to measure every little aspect. Are they seated there? Are they not? Do we have an AI? Keeping track. Are they asleep at their laptop? What's going on? So isn't that a contrast? Isn't that a contrast in views? If you trust me, why am I so heavily measured, right? So doesn't that show that you don't trust me? So how do we mitigate that? How do we mitigate that? How do we create that balance? Yeah.
So I just want to add to the question. I just want to add, I'm not going to answer. So Sam can address this as well. I'm making it tougher for Sam. I think it's, you've also got to look from other aspects, because I've been talking to people and they've been telling me, look, I've got an old school boss who wants me to check in every one hour once. Because she just doesn't trust me that she thinks that when I'm at home, I'm not working. So I need you to log in every 1 hour to show me that you are actually doing work. Send me an email. What is the report that you have sent on an hourly basis? So so changes need to happen, and adaptation perhaps need to happen from both sides, Sam. I know what your thoughts are, because you've got also the old school managers who just, who say that, look, you got to earn my trust, right? I'm not going to give it to you. And then you've got guys on the ground, please trust me, I'm not going to do anything. I'm working based on deliverables. So, there's also this tug of war that is happening, right? And then you've got organizations like Flipkart, for example, who are reading that they are encouraging their families to join in conversations like this in all their conference calls. So you've got both ends of the spectrums, Sam, maybe, you're the best person to talk about this.
I think you've made some really, really good points, actually, because look, I think the reality is change needs to be driven throughout the organization, but the tone is set from the top. It always has to be. There are very good reasons why we measure lots of things, because we are an industry that operates in many, many cases on wafer-thin margins. So the ability to be able to predict productivity is super important for the long-term survival of the business. So it's not just a question of, I don't trust you. It's a question of being able to predict the performance of an organization and capacity.
Right.
I think the key is to, first you have to identify your core talent. And not everybody's going to be, not everybody's going to be equal in this regard, right? There are people who are naturally going to have that innate leadership skill, the ability to be able to see, the need to do things in a different way. And these are the people that are going to help you drive the organization. Now, it's just like evolution. There will be a certain element of self-selection in all of this process. And there will be people who are not going to be trustworthy, who will self-select their way out of the organization. And that's, that's my belief is I think that's also a good byproduct of what this environment is creating, because you now know who are the people that are going to be trustworthy, because you can see the outcome. They may not necessarily be logged on, but any business judges itself not just by the activity, but by the outcome as well. And, different people will have different abilities to be able to achieve an outcome from an activity. And that's the key is, we look at so much data, but in reality, in most businesses, the whole business boils down to 2 or 3 numbers that you'd need to look at. And one of the things that we've got to be careful of is that we don't go blind analyzing hundreds and hundreds of statistics that we capture and then lose track of the key things that drive the business. So again, for me, I think this is breeding a next generation of leaders. It's bringing in a next generation of work and how it works. I think the whole concept of flexibility, not just from work from home, but in terms of compensation, in terms of working hours, in terms of where you work. And the beauty of it for our industry is we're absolutely wired for this, right? I know typically we have done most of our work through centers, but the reality is we're seeing more and more dispersed groups working together from all over the world to achieve an outcome. The one significant factor in this, because like Raymond said, absolutely, technology will take care of itself. but our ability to be able to select the right people to work in that environment is going to become enormously important. And once we brought them into the organization, then it's how do we retain them in the organization? Because again, this type of an environment is a perfect breeding ground for entrepreneurship, that you're already starting to see young entrepreneurial people who are taking advantage of this. Let me just go back. Let me take the word young away, because that makes it sound as if the exclusive domain of young people. We're seeing older generations who are becoming or having to become more innovative about their business simply because of the condition. So this condition, as Raymond said right at the beginning, necessity being the mother of all invention, this is what's driving a lot of the changes that we're beginning to see and we'll continue to see. The only thing is the change is going to be faster and faster.
Yeah, okay, good. Thanks for that, Sam. But Raymond, there are a few things that you mentioned that we'd like to know the practicality as to how you apply the touch, the trust, the developing of the people, the recognizing. But before that, Zul has been restless. He's been moving left and right and front and back. All right, Zul, what are your thoughts? What do you have to say about what we're talking about here?
Yes, sorry, I kept getting muted by the host. But anyway, yeah, I think there are a lot of very interesting points, and I completely agree with the fact that technology, yes, changes are there. It's going to take care of itself. Organizations have a responsibility, and what we are hearing is leadership plays a key role. Eventually, the evolution of the people within them will take care of itself. But one of the key topics that also needs to be taken into the discussion is, while we are looking at this 18-24-month window, it drives very much the topic of looking at the necessity of what is driving all of this. And our concern from looking at the ecosystem and how we're going to support a lot of these things that were mentioned by Raymond and Sam is the fact that today the necessity is there. You can call it, we are the flavor of the day in terms of what is it, of how things are being treated. But there is a big fear that the closer you get to post-MCO, whether that is immediate or whether that's in the medium to longer term, that necessity from the view of the external people from our industry and our organizations becomes less and less. And that is the big concern that I do see in terms of how prepared and how the externalities will impact what we're trying to achieve throughout post-MCO. And when you look at it, there are other industries that are much more impacted from the economy standpoint, looking at travel and leisure, construction, other hospitality businesses, and so on. And the government and the stakeholders that then drive the policies that we are all talking about in terms of what is required will then will be flooded by a lot of requests, a lot of demands from industry players and so on. So we should not take this wait and see period in terms of how we're going to look at post-MCO, but we think that this is the opportunity now, while the external parties, especially government and policy makers, look at how we are contributing to not just within MCO, but how that new norm will look like. Because my concern is, come 18 to 24 months, politics will get in the way. Yeah. One reason why you go back into the office for a conference call, Raymond, is because there's no football on the television. So the level of necessity in terms of why we are driving to do what we're doing today will decline. And if we don't grab this opportunity, that is something that it's an opportunity lost.
Zul, I've always admired how you're always the spokesperson. You know us so well. You know the industry so well, right? And I see you lobbying the state government, the federal government, as to our plight. Yeah, have they woken up? Do they realize that this is the area of focus? Do they know to focus more resources, to focus more assistance, to build this environment? Yeah. What have you done? What are some of the plights from the industry what has the government said? You want to share a little bit insight on that? What has your conversations been?
Yeah, I think the conversations primarily, if you look at it, what would have been the problem statements that have been given by the government is to look at the livelihood of the people. How does the industries that we are actually supporting can actually then not only from a what will happen post, but then at this point of time, how can we support those jobs that have been lost, the lives and the families that have been impacted. So that was then what was the core driver in terms of what led to how these opportunities can come on board. And I think what we've been trying to advocate, as you kindly put out, is how this industry not only continues to play a key role during this period, but how we can actually look at the opportunities to bring together that age-old problem of demand and supply that has actually been something that's, someone blames the government and the government blames the industry as well. So when you look at a lot of the discussions that we're trying to have, is trying to see how we can actually facilitate other ways of doing it, and how we can actually then support the companies that are coming into the location, not only from the current situation, but how we will then move forward going into post-MCO.
Can you share a feedback from the industry or request from industry as to how it would assist them, to mitigate this problematic period, right? And an example of a feedback from the industry and what the government has done or responded. Have there been any cases like that?
From our side, feedback from the industry, of course, a lot of it has got to do with understanding and facilitating the government's plans.
Right.
There are a lot of programs, the stimulus packages. Currently, how does that impact? How can we also give feedback into what the industries may require? Some looking at infrastructure requirements, some looking at some of the obligations that they have from what they're supposed to deliver to their clients and also to their stakeholders. So we're trying to find ways that we can become a channel to the government agencies to see how they can get this information across, and how we can also look at how the flexibilities can be there, notwithstanding just work from home, but moving forward, how then can we, for example, use this window to discuss the movement of people.
Right.
So that's one example that people look at, that, one of the value propositions to having your GBS or SSO in Iskandar Putri is the near shore to Singapore. But if the congestion and the ease of the movement of people is something that's going to be still a problem post MCO, then we would have lost that opportunity to see how we can address this from a demand and supply perspective.
Okay, I'm putting in a bid to build a causeway from Singapore to GBS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. See.
So from your perspective, Zul, what kind of preparations do you think the industry needs to do to prepare for post MCO?
I think the industry at the moment needs to be more engaged as well with government policies, with also people who are involved in the overall development, whether they are the institutions of higher learning, whether they are the infrastructure players, and all the necessary players that actually then will be the questions that you will anticipate as those will be the barriers, or those would be impeding the pace of the growth or the pace of the recovery of the industry. So that engagement needs to happen now in identifying how we can address post MCO at this point of time, not looking at just in the next 1 or 2 weeks, but how this will impact the industry within the next 12 to 24 months.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thanks for that, Zul. Okay. All right. Raymond, Sam.
Yeah. If I just want,
yeah. Go ahead, Raymond.
So I just want to add this, and since Zul is on the line, maybe I can instill some fire in him as well, since he's on the line.
So just don't light too much fire and burn your beard. Okay, so
the conversation I'm having with the government agencies and authorities, and I think sadly, in the last couple of years, there's been a revaluation of the SSO industry as a whole. Whether is it important enough for the industry, right? So the last couple of years, we've had this conversation, oh yeah, I think it's too high, low value job. We don't want to focus too much time on this. We should move our people up to a higher value sort of job. So the conversation has been, is SSO, is GBS, is it still relevant 20 years post what we started? Sadly, or I don't know whether it's a good or positive thing, but this pandemic has caused this new conversation again with relevant agencies to say, hey, look, can your industry absorb those who are unemployed?
Right.
So all of a sudden, we're beginning to see that, hey, there's again attention back to the industry. And the message that I'm trying to, from the association, we're trying to put across to the decision makers is, look, let's not make the same mistake again, right? We can hire these people, as we mentioned earlier. Back office jobs going to increase. We can absorb this huge majority of these people who are going to be unemployed. But let's have a strategy. Let's have a roadmap for the next 5 years for this industry. We don't want to be a stopgap measure just to absorb people because they don't have a job. And then 1 year later, when everything is over, you say, oh, okay, you guys are again low value work. Therefore, we don't want, your industry is not as critical as it is to the economy anymore. We need to have a game plan. And this is what I'm trying to, the conversation that I'm having with the decision makers are, let's have a roadmap for the next 3 years, for the 5 years, or next 5 years for this industry. We are willing to absorb them. This industry is willing to absorb them. But let's have a plan to upskill them. Let's have a plan for them to be ready for automation. Let's have a plan for them to work alongside automation in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, Raymond, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't know whether you could hear me clapping over here, but exactly the same thing. We're the kind of industry that governments go to get them out of trouble, right? So high unemployment in other industries. SSO, can you guys help us out? Retrain, redevelop, and then post it. Then we get ignored as a low value industry. I would argue that we're one of the highest value industries in terms of generating wealth in economies all over the world. Because when you start to look at the depth of economic impact that the SSO industry provides, it's massive. The only thing is governments tend to focus at the bottom end of the pyramid where we're taking intake. But you could argue that that's actually just as important as the top end of the pyramid, because you're generating future employable individuals. If you look at the lessons that we've learned from countries with systematic large unemployment in the, for want of a better description, the undereducated, it is because there's traditionally been no industry to take these people on board. So to me, this is really, really important. And there's never been a better time to sit down with government agencies and say, we need to really rethink whether we're paying enough attention to this industry, because all statistics would indicate it's one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing industry contributing to the Malaysian economy today. And it's one of the few industries, relatively speaking, that is not so dependent on an export type of an environment, like manufacturing, like oil and gas, because services are going to be required right across the world, right? Throughout the spectrum. So I think you've made the point perfectly, Raymond. And I think this is an opportunity for the government to relook at our industry and pay it the proper attention that it deserves.
Sam, since you're on spotlight here, we're going to move to the last phase here, and we're going to talk about preparations. Yeah? And what kind of preparations do you feel, all right, need to be put into place? Now, you've touched on the human capital area. So for the leaders in the room, okay, so what do they need to do to prepare for post-MCO?
Well, the first thing that you've got to think about is, what does your organization look like post-MCO? And certainly for our organization, it's already starting to look very different to when we came in. So you're going to need different skill sets. You're going to need different organizational DNA to cope with all of the changes that you're going to see. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is you're going to have to spend a lot of time with your CHRO to look at, does your talent support your strategy? And in many cases, if, we did a global poll, and over 70% of CEOs do not believe that they are as well equipped as they ought to be in terms of the talent scenario. So this is going to mean one of three things. You build your own, in which case you take people in from, you know, the entry level positions in development. And that's always a sustainable strategy. Then you're going to identify the superstars within your organization and give them the opportunity to be able to grow, create opportunities for them. And again, sometimes organizations could be very, very hierarchical and very narrow, and it's almost to the point of dead man's shoes. But, you know, one thing that we have realized as part of IR 4.0 is that you can make the organization as flat as you like. You can give people experiential opportunities to, without necessarily having their career path to have to be vertical. So again, a lot of investment in the people that you already have in terms of retaining them and creating an opportunity for them to shine. Then for what you don't have, then you need to make a decision in terms of whether you buy, you lease, or you know, what we're seeing is what we would call the next gen workforce, who are going to be significantly more gigger type of engagements. And in itself, I think there's a certain level of, we're not quite used to it yet in Malaysia, you know? We tend to view people who work on a gig basis with some element of suspicion.
That's right.
You know, they can't find a proper job. Why do they hop from one area to another? But the reality is, I think as we move out of this pandemic, I think there's going to be far more demand for that kind of next gen workforce that you can tap into and out, switch on and off. And let me tell you one thing as well, is in many employees' contract, you will see this exclusivity clause, right? We are obsessed with people working exclusively for our organization. Well, guess what?
Right.
You're going to have people working for multiple organizations concurrently and doing it better than a lot of organizations can in terms of tap into existing talent. So our ability to be able to be comfortable with a varied, dispersed, non-homogenic workforce, what we would call the sort of fluid workforce, where you can, you know, ramp up and ramp down, expand capacity, both geographically as well as from a work perspective. I think that's going to be the hallmark of the future, which again, as we've all been talking about throughout this discussion today, requires a different type of leadership. It requires a different type of vision for the organization. So if we were to take it in numbers, first, envisage where your organization is going to be. And many forward-looking organizations are taking this opportunity to get ahead of the curve and reshape their organization. So that's an important one. The second is look at the core competencies that you need as part of the organization. What's the organizational DNA going to be? Do you have it? Or where are the gaps? And how do you plug those gaps? And then three, start to look at the fixed versus the variable, because that's going to be important. You know, agility of organization in terms of cost base is going to be the hallmark of everything from this point forward. And this is what we're seeing organizations grappling with. But capacity is equally important. So how do you get capacity without necessarily being burdened with a high general operating cost? And I think that's the key in terms of strategizing moving forward and having that sort of level of fluidity of your talent pool within the organization. One last thing is collaboration. We're seeing competitors across different industries joining together for a common cause. We see that in the pharmaceutical industry when they're looking at developing drugs. We're now starting to see that right across the board, even in our own industry, as we help governments sort of figure out how do you get people back to work effectively and how do you deal with, you know, significant levels of unemployment post this. So I think that's going to be a major driver. So associations like the CCAM are going to play a critical role in terms of helping organizations collaborate in a safe environment where people who are traditionally a little bit coy, a little bit suspicious about what their competitors are doing, they're going to have to be comfortable, more comfortable with collaborating to move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just out of curiosity, Zul. Now, Sam mentioned the gig economy and how, you know, that we will be looking at more giggers. Now, you touched on employment, yeah, and how government views employment. But so, do they view giggers as employed statistically?
Sorry, do the governments consider those as employed?
Yeah, statistically, is a gigger considered employed?
I wouldn't know the official government definition of that,
Okay.
whether it's considered employed or not. But if you look at when the government looks at employment, entrepreneurship and having your own self-run businesses are things that definitely one of the avenues of employment that being looked at. And even on our side, we're looking at it as one of those potential employees, so that they can actually how they can survive moving forward in terms of doing their own businesses and doing their own thing. And we're looking at is trying to look at an enterprise, large companies, but now a lot of the focus on individuals or small enterprises.
I see. All right. Yeah, that's interesting. So I hope they do take into consideration the gig economy and the giggers. At least there'll be a recognition of it, so there'll be a support for that ecosystem. Right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Raymond. Okay, Raymond. What do we need to do prepare for post MCO? What are your thoughts?
So I think the focus, I touched a little bit. What sort of keeps me awake at night these days is start thinking about when I think about post MCO is a couple of things. Number one is I think that awareness conversations need to begin with talking about how do we improve staff engagement. Number one. And I think number two is work-life balance. I think this is going to be two very important components that we got to look at. And work-life balance and engagement can differ and will differ between organizations with different cultures. It will be different when it comes to different genders.
Having said that, Raymond,
different when it comes to different roles that you have in your play in your organization.
Sorry for interrupting. What does Daythree do right now to engage? Yeah, because we've been talking about engagement. We're talking about keeping the people engaged and excited and motivated. What do you do currently? Can you give us some examples of some things that you're doing?
Ken, I think my internet is a bit bad. Could you just repeat that question again? I didn't get you.
Absolutely. Okay. Now you've talked about how we need to engage the staff. We talked about how we need to create a sense of belonging to the staff. Yeah. And I come across the Daythree staff, and they're always upbeat and they're always very positive. So what is Daythree doing to engage the people? Yeah.
Well, I tell you, we have 2 enforced conference calls that happens every day where we get all our managers in. Right, I can tell you for a start. We've started virtual drinkings on Fridays now. After pause a month, okay, after breakfast, the liquid of your choice. But I think I think most organizations have also tried coffee over VC. I really honestly I don't have an answer for it, but for me it's an experiment. To be absolutely honest, it's new for me, but I think I echo back what Sam mentioned earlier. Communication. That communication can come in various ways and forms, and it need not be formal all the time. And here's the thing, that's the secret, right? You can just have a call and say, hey, look, and I did that last week. I said, hey, look, the next 15 minutes, we're not going to talk about work at all. Let's talk about our families and what you guys are doing.
And there's dead silence, right?
Come again?
There's dead silence.
No, actually, there was a good conversation going around about what we are doing outside work. So I think it's really a trial and error at the moment. But I think here's the thing, right? I mean, various people have different ways, different forms. I'll give an example. Last Friday, a few of us in the group got together and pulled out our guitars and pulled out our music instruments, and we just sang our hearts out till 2 a.m. in the morning. So, different forms of engagement within the team. So we got to be creative. You've got to try. You've got to try out new things. But I've always believed in this, right? And being in the contact center world, this is something that I've always preached. The end goal is loyalty, right? And how do you achieve loyalty? And this is really applicable even for politicians or any organization. Maybe if this is a tip that I can give, a sharing out of today's session today is one thing, right? To achieve loyalty, you must have contact first. Or rather, you must have a relationship. And to have that relationship, you must have contact. If you don't contact with anyone, you will never be able to establish a relationship. And if you do not establish a relationship, you will never have loyalty. Now, how you make that contact and and develop that into a relationship is totally up to you. But you must have it consistently. So that for me is engagement. You talk about, you mentioned about the people in Daythree being highly engaged or appearing positive. But I think it stems from the message that's coming from all the way from the top, right? Yeah. It's also sideways, and then it also builds from bottom up. Yeah. Right. Yeah, there is no secret recipe to this. The key word is communication. Any form of find a reason or find an excuse to communicate. That's the most important thing.
Okay, beautiful. So back to the question of what kind of preparations need to be put into place for post-MCO? What do you see that companies need to prepare for?
So a couple of things I think you need to focus on. Like I said, engagement and work-life balance. I think training and development programs will need to shift now. They need to be tuned and focused to talking about these issues, which is again work-life balance and engagement. And also most importantly, and Sam also touched about this, is your performance management systems have to change.
Yeah.
Your KPIs have to change. I know we spoke about metrics earlier. We are an organization that we equate dollars and cents to the metrics that we build and that we achieve, right? That has to change. The performance has to change. And during this COVID period, there's a leeway. If you're having a conversation, if you're in a contact center and you're having a conversation with a customer and your dog walks in or your wife walks in or your daughter walks in, it's acceptable. Right? But I'm not sure it's going to be acceptable 3 months down the road. So the definition of professionalism now is also shifting. It's changing. Once we said you have to wear a suit and a tie. Then we dropped off the suit and the tie. We say it's still professional. Now you got families coming to work and you're saying, hey, it's also professional. So the definition of professionalism is also shifting. It's changing. Yeah. So and all this means that new forms of training, new forms of speaking of my dog just walked in. New forms of training and really mindset change that needs to happen, right? So I think the next few months, that's the conversation. The conversation's got to be about getting a new playbook in these areas.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that, Raymond. Okay, we're going to move to questions Q&A. Okay, for the participants or the participants in the room. All right. So for the audience here, so you got two choices. One, you can actually type your questions in the chat box. Okay, or you can unmute yourself and verbally ask. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do is, I think we have a question here first. All right. Open to anyone. All right. Now the question here would be a little bit off of SSO, but I think it can be tied in, which is the tourism industry. So how do you view the tourism industry? And, for it is a competitive time. How do you see it changing? How do you see it morphing? How do you see any ideas that you feel that we can salvage the tourism industry?
I've got some thoughts. I know it's one of the most important thing about tourism. I mean, we're blessed in Malaysia of having a beautiful countries and many, many places to visit. I think this is, for anybody living in Malaysia, we're extremely fortunate to be living somewhere where you can get in your car, drive for 2 or 3 hours and experience absolutely beautiful countryside. The one thing I think where we have made some improvements over the past few years, but we've still got some way to go, is in the customer experience. And that still, I think, has some way to go in terms of that holistic feel. you know, whether it be a hotel, whether it will be a resort, whether it will be, you know, the pickup points. So I would, if I was advising the tourism industry, Malaysia almost sells itself. I think once people start to have the freedom to travel, I think they will come. But I would use this time to invest in your teams and your staff to help them enhance the entire experience. Because, you know, memories are made not just by the places that you visit, by the people that you interact with when you visit these places. So that would be my advice to anybody who's in the tourism industry. Invest in training your people, invest in having them sort of focus more on the customer experience. If there's anything that this current situation has taught us about the importance of human contact, right? So.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Zain. Okay, I think that goes without saying. I mean, the tourism industry is really suffering right now, right? And you know, we do benefit from a beautiful country, and so we don't really have to travel far. But here's something interesting. Another question in the chat. I think the panelists can see this also. Right? Is Malaysia still an attractive location for IT offshore or the nearshore model? Right? Is there anything that we need to do to be more competitive, you know, with Europe, US, and Australia? Right. So how do you see us as being a location of choice for?
I don't want to hog the floor, but I've got some initial thoughts on this as well.
Sure. Go ahead.
I mean, first and foremost, I think we're going to see a certain element of protectionism from a lot of these countries with a view to try and protect local jobs. So what we have to be able to offer is it has to go beyond just simply being a lower cost model, which means that we're going to have to be able to provide the expertise to be able to move. Because one of the biggest arguments that I have with my colleagues in the US and in Europe is, does Malaysia have the right talent with the experience to be able to provide that level of support? That, especially when you're talking about very high-end IT support. So I think this is something I know that Zul is very, very familiar with and intimately involved. And again, this is where we have to draw a balance between investing in local talent, but also strategically bringing in foreign talent as and when required to make sure that we have that. Infrastructure-wise and capability-wise, I can't think of many better places in the world than Malaysia. But I think if we're going to be challenged in any area, it's the availability of talent with that level of skill sets, especially when you're talking about very, very niche skills in IT security, cyber security, big data, RPA. I think that's where, you know, we need some bridging in terms of where we are in terms of the talent inventory currently and where we need to be able to attract this type of work.
I just want to add to that. So I think two things that has come out very clearly out of this whole pandemic is, you know, Zul, I think, this is the perfect question for you to answer. But just let me add 2 points in this. I think two things that have come out very, very clearly. Number one is the infrastructure. You know, we have about over 85% mobile penetration rate, connectivity rate in urban and suburban areas. Not the greatest, but we have connectivity, and that has enabled industries like ours to quickly make that transition from office to home. That's the key. Countries like India and Philippines, for example, who are also in the SSO space, they don't have the luxury that we have. So that's number one. Number two is also the fact that what has come out very clearly is that our public health care facilities is seen to be far superior than many other countries. So I think these are two reasons why, you know, investors and also potential organizations who choose to offshore would look at countries that they would want to go to. I think this is two very good reasons that we should be selling as a country.
Okay, all right. So we're still highly viable.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, you know, the question on whether we would be more attractive or we would remain attractive as a location for other countries or other, you know, whether Europe, US, or even as near as Singapore would look at, I think would only be answered as far as how attractive we we are in terms of what Sam mentioned in terms of the talent that is available.
Right.
You know, I think over the last 10, 15 years, we're always on the radar when people are asking us, about what location in especially this part of the world should they look at as a location. But it's also always we lose out when we say that we don't have the scale of the talent and so on. But I think that will change in the landscape moving forward, because we're not so much looking at the issues of the infrastructure or the technology anymore, but now we're looking at whether or not how the evolution of the talent pool that we can look at that has come out of a result of this pandemic in terms of the readiness of our people and how the services will be made available. I think that will be very attractive because the basic foundations are there. It's just that I think previously that drive, that roadmap has been somewhat stunted by the need to move up the value chain.
Right.
I think as we move up the value chain, you know, that balance, as I fully mentioned earlier, in terms of how we provide that value proposition to not only the domestic clients, but how we position ourselves to external countries and external clients. That's going to be very, very key in how we can look at. I think, for example, if you look at Singapore today, one of the clear opportunities that looking at saying, you know, Iskandar Putri is just maybe a half an hour drive away, looking at what are the impacts of COVID-19 in the last 6 weeks. Is business continuity needs to happen. And if there is if I had either a satellite site, or if there is a service provider that can actually offer these services for me from now there's a new term that's being coined, service as a service, you know, moving on from something else. Can I tap on services as and when I need them? Then that's something that we are looking at to see, but it all depends on our readiness to adapt and embrace these changes that, you know, things need to happen now, but these changes are going to impact the way we do things moving forward post MCO 12, 18 months from now.
Right, absolutely. Thanks for that, Zul. Now, the next question we're looking at, it really ties to the business continuity man, or the BCP that we have here, right? So the next question, I think this one will go to Raymond, right? So it's from Ivy. Thank you, Ivy. Okay, so the SSO and the BPO, how are the SSOs BPO managing their costs? You know, especially real estate. Yeah. Okay. Now that you see that everybody's working from home, or you're adopting the working from home model.
So I think, you know, we are making this transition, and I think I mentioned this earlier on. You know, traditionally we've been an industry that has always required a huge amount of real estate. That is going to change, right? When we go into a hybrid model, you know, easily perhaps half, because you're going to have a situation where a lot of people. So, you know, I'll just give an example. My organization, I'll be the first to admit this. I've only been able to transition about 50% of my workforce to work from home. And why am I not able to move this balance 50% is because of regulations. So the one thing that we also need to, and you know, you asked me this question and I forgot to mention earlier, is that government regulations don't permit certain industries to enable you to work from home. So you will have now governance issues that we need to begin to have this conversation with agencies, with the central banks, because I do a lot of work in the financial services space, and by regulation, we are not allowed to handle some of the processes that we are managing away from the office. Which requires a PCI DSS certified environment and stuff like that. So these conversations will begin. We will start these conversations with regulatories now. How do we make this happen? So, so as far as real estate is concerned, I think it will shrink because we're going to have a period, as I mentioned earlier, where you know, we're going to work on a hybrid model and sort of Uberize the contact center world or BPO space, so to speak. Enable people to work from home, tap on, Sam mentioned this earlier, tap on, you know, retirees, tap on mothers who just want to work for 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day. So to bring in people into the new economy, people who have not been able to serve under the old economy, to bring people into the new economy to be able to work. So this is going to create a lot of job opportunities for those who are employable but currently not employed because of personal circumstances.
Right, right, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think to also address that, if we talk about the real estate that's involved, right, you will see a lot of the SSOs and BPOs, okay, downscaling the space that they need, the real estate, right, and it really depends, chicken or the egg, right? If there is an increased awareness from the industry as a whole, all right, or rather from businesses as a whole, for your BCP to kick in, right, then we will have the sites available. Yeah, the real estate can be redirected and repositioned and refit, yeah, to provide the SaaS model that Zul mentioned, right? And so that will be able to be a very good option for you to manage your space. All right. Okay. So good. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
Now, and just to add on to that is also that you will also see more and more SSOs companies, sort of splitting the eggs in many more baskets. You're going to have people working for multiple sites now. So you're going to have, I've got a friend who was telling me that he works in an organization where he's got a super secure BCP environment where his operations runs from three countries in, I think it was Philippines, India, and Mexico or something of that sort. And all three have been hit. So, it's amazing that, there's no more you're no longer foolproof. You can have 3 BCP sites and still your operations are hit. Yep. So, so you're going to see that people, on the converse, people are also going to be operating out of more sites and would create demand for more smaller sites, so to speak, rather than one large site.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's how we're going to be seeing the change there. All right. Any other questions from our participants? Any other questions? Anybody want to ask a question verbally? You can just put your hands up and the team will unmute you. Anyone? Oh. Going once? Twice? Okay. All right. So, with that said, since we don't have any other questions, final words, yeah, since it's already 12 o'clock. Okay, so final words from the panelists. Anything else you want to add, to lead us to post-MCO, right? And where we're heading and what's your personal advice? Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Zul.
I think I just want to repeat the fact that, today the necessity drives the re-emergence of the SSO industry in terms of how we can contribute, in terms of what we can make to address the challenges that are going on in the current MCO. But, I would just want to repeat that the opportunity will be lost if we do not embrace on these changes and make those everlasting changes going forward. So, we don't want to be drowned out when the time comes that other priorities overtake the priorities that we need to make that should have been made anyway, but it's been driven by this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you for that, Zul. Yeah, Sam?
I think this is going to be business unusual, and I would summarize it with next generation leadership, a leadership that's going to be very visionary in terms of the way they prioritize talent. They're very, very clear in terms of the communication. We'll find a way to be able to engage and enroll everybody in the vision of the organization in not necessarily the way we have in the past. It's going to be a sort of dispersed workforce. I think the second part is we're going to have to look at next generation work. What we have always thought is traditional in our industry may well change. So, our industry has typically been infrastructure reliant. We've all worked in the same place. I think the future is going to be multiple sites, perhaps more virtual work, which means you're going to have to be much, much more attuned to the type of workforce that you have.
Right.
The final thought is, choose your talent carefully, because very often when we hire for today's needs. My advice is hire for where you think your business is going to be in the future rather than where it is today. Because by the time you have people on board, things will already have changed and the rate of change is faster. So I think the key really is about being able to pivot quickly. It's about being able to constantly innovate the organization and stay very connected with your people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Sam. All right, Raymond, want to lead us out of here? Raymond, you're on mute. Raymond, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, Ken. So my quick piece of advice is this: we have, I think, most of us have done well in the last 5 years. Last 5 weeks, we have transitioned. We've done phase one well. We've made the transition to either work from home or find a formula that's working for our organizations. Post MCU, I think, we need to begin to have conversations about, like I mentioned, work-life balance, engagement, governance, regulatory discussions to make this happen, because that's the second phase. We've only got the physical aspect done. We've not got the emotional aspect completed yet. That conversations need to take place, and there is a danger to oversimplify this. So we need to have these tough conversations, because it's not easy, because these conversations involve genders, involve different roles you play in your household. It involves different roles you play in your organization. It involves different hierarchies and different cultures in an organization. So that conversation needs to take place, and it has to take place now. And organizations like Acton, is primed to sort of have more conversations around this area. And I encourage you to get these conversations going, because the more we talk about it, the more we get it right. Because nobody has got a perfect playbook. Nobody has got a perfect playbook now. Everybody has got bits and pieces of everything. We need now to put it together. Sam's talking about new hiring methodologies. Zul's talking about different angles. So we need to put this together. And this playbook, this new playbook, is what we need to sort of perfect, because it's unprecedented, and the word unprecedented means we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Yep. So we can only try our best. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. I think the SSO, the industry as a whole has rebounded well. Right. Has pivoted well. Okay. Has responded well. How fast things are moving. So if I'm allowed to just summarize the session before, I think we have one last question here. All right, let's just go ahead and look at the question here. Panelists, are you all okay to just listen to this question?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So that last question here would be quite a broad question. So which area of IT or the IT industry will have the most opportunity coming up in your opinion? All right. Any thoughts on that? Which area of the IT industry will have the most opportunity?
I think there are a few, but the one I would say is going to become more and more prevalent, and we're seeing this already, is cybersecurity. RPA is also a growing industry, but the biggest preoccupation now is about security.
Absolutely agree. I wouldn't add on to that. I agree, absolutely.
Okay. So what do you think?
I think both cybersecurity and e-commerce, in terms of how do we then consolidate a lot of those things that are going on now, consolidation of a lot of those individual efforts that are going on. That's going to be one opportunity that should be looked at.
Yeah, I think the lowest barrier of entry would be what Zul mentioned here, would be e-commerce. Yeah, okay, or even an automated delivery system. I mean, when you talk about goods and services, delivery of goods and services, to be part of that supply chain, would be beneficial. It's a relatively low barrier of entry. All right, anybody can design an app. Yeah, as long as you have the right ideas. Okay, you can just jump in and get on board. All right. Also, let me just wrap up. Yeah, if there's anything to take away from this webinar, first I'd like to thank all the panelists for your time. Yeah, okay, Zul, okay, from I2M. Okay, Sam from Manpower, and of course Raymond from Daythree. Yeah. So to take away from the webinar, I think most important that we need to remember is what do we need to do post MCO for the SSO industry, right? Is to engage with government, talk to the government, be ahead of the game, right? Share what's going on, what are your expectations, right? Be engaged with government thrusts, yeah, and also projects. From an industry, from a operation standpoint, right? Be able to pivot, be able to get ready for those changes where it is going to be more of balancing your people, engaging with your people. Okay? And from the individual human capital development perspective is to recognize those individuals, right, and to develop those training, those skills and competencies to get them ready for the next phase. Right? The perfect time to do that. All right. Now, so with that said, I'm going to wrap up the session here. All right. So thank you, Zul, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Raymond, all right, for your time. Okay, and also participants. Yeah, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Jimmy, you can stop the recording now.